Hey, I'm Aria, and in this tutorial we're going to be making liquid effects using dynamic paint. If you enjoy my content, please like and subscribe, and if you want to grab a copy of this blend file, then head over to my Patreon page and become a member, and as well you'll be helping me to bring more content to you in the future. Okay, so here we go. First, let's open up a new scene, hit A to select everything, and then hit delete. The first thing we're going to add is our wheel, so hit Shift A, Mesh, and we're going to go to Torus. Then we just want to come down to the left here to this little menu and click this arrow to open up our settings. We can leave the major radius the same, but let's change the minor radius to 0.32. And now we can rotate our objects, so R to rotate, Y, and type in 90. Click, and then we're going to scale this, so hit S to scale and type in 1.8. Then we can bring this up by hitting G to move, Z to log to the Z, and type in 4. Let's just go over to the right here to the modifiers properties. Click here, and then we want to add a subdivision surface and set this to 1 or 2. Then just to smooth everything out, we can right click and shade smooth. Next we want to add in an additional torus, so Shift and A, Mesh, and then we'll click Torus. This time you want to set our minor radius back to the default, which is 0.25. Then it's safe to click away again. We can right click and shade smooth. Then R to rotate, X, and 90. Then we want to hit G to move, Z, and type in 2.2. So now we just want to scale this so that it just fits within our diameter of our larger torus. So let's hit S to scale and type in 0.45. Then again, just make sure that it's poking slightly through the larger torus. Now that we've got that, we want to make a second one straight above. So let's hit Shift and D to duplicate. Then just hit Z to lock to the Z axis, and we can just bring our mouse all the way up just till it's intersecting the top. And you can also hold Shift if you just want to lower the amount of increments that your object will move. Then when it's about centered, you can click. This doesn't have to be perfect. You can see this one's a little off. If you want, you can click it, G, Z, and just hold Shift just to move it slightly. And those should work great. So next we want to add an empty that will control these two torus objects. So Shift A, we can go all the way down to empty and click plane axis. Then we just want to bring this up by hitting G, Z, and typing in 4. That way it's perfectly centered within our other torus. Okay, so select this top torus here, then Shift select the bottom one. Then finally, while still holding Shift, we just want to select our empty in the center. Then hold Control, hit P. Then we're going to select Object, Keep Transform. Click away to deselect everything, and then again we're just going to click our empty. Hit N on the keyboard to bring up our menu here. Just make sure that you're in the Item tab. And now we just want to rotate our empty along our X axis. So just click here to head back to frame 1. Then again, in my case, I wanted to rotate this way, so we're going to rotate on the X axis. So we can right click here and insert single keyframe. Then we'll just come down here, click here to go to the last frame in our animation. Click back on our X rotation and we can type in something like 720. Right click and insert another keyframe. If we were to hit play, you'll see that it does speed up at the beginning, and near the end it's going to slow down as well. But for this tutorial, I am going to change it just so that it matches my animation. So up on the top left here, we can just click on the editor type and go to the graph editor. Up here, click normalize just so that our wave is manageable in the viewport. Then just make sure that you have everything selected by hitting A. Then you can either right click, go to interpolation mode and click linear, or you can hit T and just click linear that way. Now you see that we've got a constant increase. So back up to the left here, we're going to click the editor type and head back to the 3D viewport. Now if we hit play, you see that we have one constant speed. Awesome, so we've already got our first setup for our simulation, so let's just quickly jump into that by clicking on our large torus. Then just heading over to the right here to the physics properties, click dynamic paints. Then we just want to come down, and in one of my other tutorials I went a little bit more in depth with this, but there's just two different options. In this case we want this to be our canvas, and these smaller toruses are going to be our brush, which just means that our canvas is the thing that's being affected, whereas our brushes are going to be the things that are causing the effect. So click add canvas. Then we just want to leave our format to vertex so that it displaces our mesh along the vertex points. set our start and end frame. Then I'm not going to go through all of these in this tutorial, we're just going to click waves. And again, I'm not going to go into too much detail with these. If you want to know a little bit more, check out my other dynamic paint tutorial. Click open borders. Then we want to set our timescale to 0.5, our speed to 3, damping to 0.1, spring to 0.1, and smoothness to 0.1 as well. Again, if you just want a quick explanation, you can hover over any of these and it'll sort of explain what they do. But again, if you want more detail, just check out some other tutorials for that. Okay, so that's done. So now we can just click on each of our smaller torus objects here and click dynamic paint. Change the type to brush and click add brush. Then you can leave everything else as default. Click here and we're going to add dynamic paint, switch to brush and add brush. So now's a good time to save. Head back to frame 1 and you can just hit play. You can see that we're already starting to get an effect, but it's looking pretty jagged. So what we want to do is just click on our mesh, then just head over to the modifiers properties. Then because we're doing a simulation, let's just head back to frame 1 just so we get a better result. Now we can set both of these subdivisions that we originally placed to 1. Click here and we can add a new subdivision surface. Then we're going to set this to 2, and in Blender the modifiers work from top to bottom, so the first thing that we're doing is subdividing our torus. Then we're going to add our dynamic paint simulation, and once that's calculated we're going to subdivide that again. Now you'll see that if we hit play, things are looking a lot nicer. Great, so I hope yours is looking good as well. Normally I would bake out my simulation now, but since we're adding particles later on, a few of them may interact with our wheels. So let's just leave our cache for now, and once we add our particles, we'll bake those first, then our torus and our ground after. So the final thing that we need to do for our torus here is just we're going to spin this on our z-axis. So we want to add one more control by hitting Shift A, going to empty and clicking plane axis. Then we can just bring this up by hitting G, Z, and 7. Okay, so click the torus, then we're going to hold Shift and click our empty. Then while still holding Shift, we'll click our new empty, hold Control and hit P, and select Object Key Transform. Click away, and then if we were to go up here and open up our empty, you can see that everything is now connected. Okay, so just make sure that you're on frame 1. Click the empty, then we just want to come over to our transform settings, right click and insert single keyframe. Then let's just jump to the last frame in our animation, click on the Z and we can type in 360. Right click and insert single keyframe. Now if we hit play, you'll see that it is a bit of a slow start, but our torus is now spinning. Again, to fix that issue of it starting slow, if you want, just head up here to the editor type, graph editor, A to select your points, then T and linear. Back up here and let's head back into the 3D viewport. Hit play and now you'll see that things are working correctly. Awesome, so now we can move on to our ground plane, so Shift A, Mesh and Plane. Then we're going to hit S to scale and type in 20. Then we can just bring this along our x-axis by hitting G, X, and we'll just drag our mouse and click. Since we're using such a large ground plane, let's just reset our transforms by holding Control, hit A, and click all transforms. You'll see that because we moved this off-center, that our pivot point moved as well, so let's right-click, set origin, and origin to geometry. Well, because we're going to be simulating on our plane, we need to add some subdivisions, so let's hit Tab to go into edit mode, or again, you can click up here to go into edit mode as well, then right-click and subdivide. Click here and we're going to type in 100, then just make sure you save, and if you got a bit slower computer, you may want to leave this at 100, but to get a bit more detail, I'm going to right click once more and click subdivide again. You can always set your initial subdivision to 75, then when you subdivide twice it won't be as dense. Now hit Tab to go back into object mode or click here. Then just head over to the right, click the physics properties, click dynamic paint again, and we're already set to canvas, so we can click add canvas. Scroll down to surface type and let's set this to waves. And the only thing I changed from mine was the damping to 0.1. And that's it. So now we just need our particles to interact with our canvas. So Shift A, Mesh, and Plane. Then we'll hit S to scale and type in 17. G and X just so we can bring this back so it's a little bit more centered. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. Then G, Z, and we'll just bring this up with our mouse. Okay, so just head over to the right here and we're going to click the particle properties now. Click the plus, and this is mostly up to you. I'm just going to set my number to 5,000. You of course want to set your start and end frames to the length of your animation and as well your lifetime. You can remove velocity. If you want, you can add a bit of motion to them by adding some Brownian motion, which will just kind of give it a bit of a jitter. Then if we scroll down a little bit further, we just want to switch from halo to object. Then we'll just quickly create a particle. So Shift A, mesh, and we'll just go to UV sphere. Then G, Z, just to bring this down under our ground plane just so it's out of sight. Right click and shade smooth. Now we can just click back on our emitter, scroll down again. Then we can just set our object to our sphere. And that's it. So I'm just going to uncheck show emitter for both the render and the viewport. Head back to frame 1. Then if I hit play, you'll see that we've got our particles falling. So to make these interact with our ground plane, we can either just click here on one of the particles, which will select everything, or you can again just select your plane over here. Let's just rename this to emitter just in case we're having trouble finding it. Back to frame 1, head over to the physics properties, and we're just going to add a dynamic paint. Click here to change this to brush, and click add brush. So if we left this to default, nothing would really happen. What we need to do is change our source. So click here, and instead of having our mesh volume, we're going to select particle system. Then it's going to ask us which particle system, so we'll click here, and we only have one, so we can select particle settings. Now if we hit play, you'll see that our particles start to fall and they're affecting our ground. Things are looking a little blocky, so just select the ground, right click, and shade smooth. And that's it. So now that we've got all of our simulations ready, we can just bake everything. So the first thing we want to bake is our particles. So just select your emitter up here, or you can select one of the particles as well. Head over to the particle properties. Then we just want to scroll up to find our cache settings and click bake. This should only take about 30 seconds or less. Now that that's done, we can click on our torus. Then we want to head over to our physics properties, scroll down, open up the cache, and we can hit bake. Finally, we can click our ground. In this case, I just want to select open borders, just so that our waves dissipate into nothing. And all these bakes should only take about 30 seconds apiece. Now if we hit play, you'll see that all of our simulations are working together. Great, so just pick a frame that looks good to you and we can just sort of set up our view. So let's hold shift, hit A all the way down, and let's select camera. Then again, you just want to set your viewport up to something roughly close to where you want to be. Hold Control Alt and hit 0 on your numpad. Okay, so now you can just use these over here to set up your camera, or you can also hit F3, type in walk, and use your arrow keys to move in and out, as well as using your mouse to orbit. Then when you're happy, just click. Okay, so let's head over to our shading tab. Hit 0 on your numpad, or you can just click here to go into the camera. Then I just want to have a little bit more room, so I'm going to close these side windows here. Great, so the first thing I like to do before I add any materials is to add an HDRI. So if we just head up to the right here, we can just go into our render preview just so we can see what's happening. Then we just want to make sure that we select our world properties here. Then you'll see that all we have for a background is just a gray color, so let's change that by clicking here and going to environment texture. If you want to use the one that I'm using the one that I've used for the last few tutorials. So you may already have it, but if not, you can head over to this link and it's just a free download. Just make sure to click here, no need to sign up. Once you have that, you can click open. Then just find where the HDRI is on your computer and click open image. Now we've got some basic lighting, but let's just brighten it up a bit by changing the strength of our HDRI to 3. Now we want to select our particles, so I'm just going to go up to the right here and select the sphere. Then I'm just going to rename this particle just so that it's less confusing. Then you can either go to the materials properties here and click new, or you can just use the shader editor. So make sure you've got your particle selected and click new. Then we want to bring our metallic all the way up and our roughness all the way down. And just click here to change the base color to something blue. Then instead of leaving this value to 1, we just want to set this to something like 5, which will give us this kind of glowing effect. So that's just a quick way to get a little bit more value out of your shader. Click the ground, then click new. Again, we're going to bring the metallic all the way up and we're going to change the roughness to 0.2. Next, we can click on our water wheel, click new. This time we're going to set the roughness to 0.1 and we can set the transmission to 1. Then we just want to head over here to the materials properties, scroll all the way down to the bottom and add screen space refractions. You could also just hit N on your keyboard and go to options and set that here as well. Okay, so then you can just select any one of the other torus objects, whichever one, click new. Then we're going to set the metallic to 1, roughness to 0, and again we're just going to go to the color and pick a blue. Then we're going to set our value to 5. Then just click the other torus, click new, metallic to 1, roughness to 0. Then we'll just change this to dark red and set the value to 5. Alright, so that's it for our materials. So now let's just head back into the layout tab, turn on our render preview, then we can just start finishing the look of our scene. So the first thing we want to do is just head over to the Eevee's properties here, where we can just add a few different options. So let's click ambient occlusion. And we also want to turn on bloom. Then we also want to turn on screen space reflections, which you'll see we're starting to get a reflection here. This is a little bit low, so what we can do is just grab our empty. And you see that if we hit N, we don't have any keyframes on our Z, so we can just bring this down till it's a little bit closer to our ground plane. Then the same with our camera. We'll just click our camera and we can just bring this down. Okay, so now you can see that our reflections are looking pretty good. So just head back to the right and we also want to add in refractions as well. And now you see that we get some really good light effects on our water. So now we just need to finish the rest of our scene. So let's just head back into flat shading just so we can add a few more things here. Shift A, mesh, and we'll add a plane. S to scale and you can type in 100. Then again GX just to bring this further back. Then we just want to bring this just below our mesh here, so hit G, Z, and then hold Shift, and we can just bring our mouse down just till you're not seeing any artifacts. And click. Scroll out a little bit more. Shift A, mesh, and we can add a cylinder. Hit S to scale, and we can just make this quite large. Then S, Shift Z, just to make it a lot wider. Then just bring this into place. Tab to go into edit mode, then just click here or hit 3 for face select mode. Click here, delete, and faces. Now we can hit tab to go back into object mode, G, Z, and we can just bring this up. Awesome, so now you can just click here to go back into the camera, then right click the cylinder and shade smooth. So now if we just head back into our render preview and turn off our overlays, you can see that we have a bit of a seam here. So what we can do to fix that is if we just click our ground plane, then just make sure you're in the materials properties, click here, and in this case we want to use material 1. If you were to click on our original ground plane, you'll see that we're using material 1, so we want to make sure that that's the same. Then we can click our cylinder and do the same thing. Now if we turn off our overlays, you'll see that we're getting a lot nicer result. But just to take this a little bit further, we'll just click on our camera, head down to the camera properties, and add some depth of field. Open this up, and we just want to select a focus object, which in this case can just be the torus. And then set the f-stop to something like 0.1 or 0.2. Awesome, so for mine I just added a few more things to enhance the lighting. So if we just head back into flat shading, and turn back on our overlays, we can add some lights by hitting Shift A, select light, and we'll click area. Then you just want to bring this kind of up and back, RY to rotate, RZ, then S to scale, then G, Shift Z, and we can just bring this back a little bit further. Hit 0 to head back into the camera, then we can just position this a little bit better, bring it up and scale a bit. So with the light selected, make sure you head over to the light properties. Then you can set the power to 2500 and set this to a blue. Click here to go into render preview. Then we can just hit G, Shift Z, and just bring this back a little bit further. Then when you're happy with that positioning, Shift T and Y just to add a new light, bring this over and click. Then you just want to rotate this by hitting R and Z. Okay, so there's still a couple more things we can do with lighting here, so head up to the top and we'll head back into our flat shading and turn our overlays back on. Then we can hit Shift A and go to Light Probe and click Reflection Cube Map. Just bring this up a bit, then we can hit S and Shift Z just to scale this out so it's really wide, till it's about as wide as our scene. But to get the best results, just make sure that it stays within the cylinder. Then we can hit S and Z just to scale this up. Then we just don't want to go too far, just make sure that our inner circles are still above our ground planes. Hit 0 to go back into camera view, turn on the viewport shading, overlays off. Then we can just go into our Eevee render settings, head down all the way down to indirect lighting, and click bake. Make sure to turn on auto bake just so that if you make any changes, it will rebake automatically. Then the very final thing that I did was tried using the new SSGI add-on for Eevee. So if you want to do that, just head to the link in the description. Then once you've got that downloaded, you just want to head to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, click the Install button, then just find the add-on, click it, and install add-on. Once that's installed, you should see this option here. If not, just search for SSGI and make sure that that's selected on. Once you've got that add-on, you should see a tab on the side here that says SSGI for Eevee. Then again, I've just started using this, so I don't know a lot about it, but I know that if you just click add, you will get a basic setup here. So this is a little bit much. And you can see that we are getting a few issues, so I did have a little bit of trouble with this. So if you do get something like this, you can just quickly go back into flat shading and head back. I'm not sure if that's part of the add-on or if it's something else, so I did end up using this for my final render, but there was a couple issues along the way, so just keep that in mind as you're working with this. I'm noticing that the lights are looking a little bright, so I'm just going to go here and bring those down just a little bit, just so that it's a little bit more subtle, and that's looking awesome. You can just head over to the rendering tab now. Make sure that you've got motion blur selected and render image. So that's everything. I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial. Again, please like and subscribe if you like my work, and if you can support me even further, make sure to check out my Patreon page as well. Okay, I'll see you next week. Bye!